At Briarton Medical Center, where lives hang in the delicate balance of steady hands and trusted machines, Dr. Alana Reese has built a reputation as one of the best cardiac surgeons on staff. Dedicated, brilliant, and resilient, she has overcome every challenge the world of medicine and life has thrown at her. But during a critical surgery, a vital piece of equipment suddenly fails, pushing Alana and her team to the edge. The patient survives thanks to her quick thinking, but relief is short-lived when whispers begin to spread. Fingers point at Alana, led by a colleague with ambition and a dangerous grudge, Dr. Evan Cross. As rumors take root, trust erodes, and Alana finds herself wrongfully accused of negligence. Determined to clear her name, Alana dives headfirst into a labyrinth of hospital records, hidden motives, and startling revelations. What she uncovers is far worse than sabotage, a conspiracy that stretches higher than she ever imagined, endangering not only her career, but the very patients she swore to protect. Who can she trust when allies are few and shadows grow darker by the day? And how far is Alana willing to go to uncover the truth? The sun barely crested the horizon as Dr. Alana Reese sat on the edge of her modest leather couch, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee. The quiet of her apartment felt unnerving that morning. Normally, she welcomed the silence before her long shifts, a chance to steady herself before facing the relentless demands of Briarton Medical Center. But today, her thoughts were restless. Her one-bedroom apartment reflected the life she had built carefully over the years. The furniture was practical, the walls adorned with pictures of her family from South Carolina, and a bookshelf stood proud against the far corner, mostly medical textbooks, and a few novels she swore she would finish someday. The small balcony door let in soft morning light that touched everything warmly, but Alana barely noticed. She turned the cup in her hands, lost in thought. Another day, another battle, she murmured to herself, placing the coffee aside. At 35, Alana had accomplished much in her career. Her path to becoming a cardiac surgeon had been anything but easy. She carried herself with quiet confidence, though many had questioned her abilities, more so because of her race and gender than her skill. She had learned to let the murmurs bounce off her like rain mostly. Today, however, something gnawed at her. Perhaps it was the urgency of the upcoming surgery, or maybe it was the lingering tension she had been feeling lately at Briarton. She brushed the thought aside, shaking her head as she stood. Her dark curls were pulled into a neat bun, and her pressed scrubs lay folded on the arm of the couch. "Get it together, Reese," she whispered. The hospital buzzed with its usual frenetic energy when Alana stepped through the automatic doors. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, the sounds of monitors and muffled conversations filling the halls. She greeted the nurses at the front desk with a tight smile, though her mind was already on her first case. "Dr. Reese," a voice called behind her. It was Nurse Maria Hall, a short, sturdy woman with salt and pepper hair. Maria had been Alana's ally since day one at Briarton. Her steady presence and unshakable loyalty made her more than a colleague, she was family. "Maria, good morning," Alana said, her voice lightening. "You look like you didn't sleep," Maria teased, handing her a clipboard. "Big surgery today, huh?" Alana nodded. "Mr. Henry Tate, 45 years old, advanced heart disease. We are replacing his mitral valve. It's a critical case." Maria softened. "Henry Tate's a good man. The community loves him. He's lucky to have you as his surgeon." "Thank you," Alana replied. "Let's make sure I earn that." As they walked toward the operating wing, Alana could already feel the shift in her mind. The weight of responsibility settled in, as it always did, sharp, heavy, and steady. In the OR, mistakes cost lives. There was no room for self-doubt, no time for hesitation. The surgical team had already prepped Mr. Tate when Alana stepped into the OR. The room was sterile and bright, the overhead lights glaring down onto the patient. Machines beeped softly, and the rhythmic pulse of the heart monitor filled the air. "Good morning, team," Alana said as she approached the table. Her voice was calm, her movements methodical. She washed her hands, suited up, and took her place at the head of the table. "Vitals are stable," Maria said, standing at Alana's right. "Let's begin," Alana said, her voice steady. For the first 2 hours, everything ran smoothly. The surgical team moved in perfect rhythm, their hands working like an orchestra. Alana navigated the delicate work of accessing the heart with practiced ease. Her focus was absolute, her hands unwavering. "Heart-lung machine engaged," said Dr. Evan Cross, a younger surgeon assisting her. His tone was clipped, and though it was subtle, Alana caught the edge in his voice. "Thank you," Alana replied, not looking up. She was used to Evan's behavior. He was brilliant but sharp-tongued, always on edge, especially when working under her. Lately, his tone had turned colder. As Alana worked, the silence in the room grew heavier. Seconds turned to minutes, each movement more critical than the last. But then it happened. The heart-lung machine sputtered. A piercing alarm broke through the stillness. "What is that?" Maria's voice was sharp, her eyes darting to the machine. Alana froze for half a second before regaining control. "Check the machine. What's wrong?" Evan's face went pale. "It's malfunctioning. We are losing blood pressure." The room turned frantic. Alana's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "Manual bypass, now." The surgical team moved quickly, their hands shaking. Alana fought to keep Mr. Tate stable as they tried to switch the machine to backup settings. She glanced at Maria, who nodded silently, her trust in Alana clear. "Pressure is still dropping," Evan shouted. "We are losing him." "Quiet," Alana snapped. "Focus." The next few minutes felt like an eternity. Alana's mind raced as she adjusted for the failure, manually controlling blood flow while coordinating her team. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and every muscle in her body tensed with focus. After what felt like hours, Mr. Tate's vitals began to stabilize. The alarms quieted. The team sighed in relief, though tension still hung thick in the air. "He is stable," Maria whispered. Alana's hands paused for just a moment. Her chest tightened with relief, but she didn't let it show. "Let's finish," she said firmly. The surgery was completed without further incident, but the air felt heavier as Alana peeled off her gloves and scrubs. Outside the OR, her exhaustion finally hit her like a wave. "That was close," Maria murmured as she walked beside Alana. "Too close." Alana nodded. "We saved him. That is what matters." "Dr. Reese!" They both turned to see Evan approaching, his face flushed with anger. "You caused that malfunction, Reese," he spat. "The setup was your responsibility. That machine almost killed our patient." Alana's blood ran cold. She stared at Evan, her voice low. "Are you suggesting I caused this?" "You were the lead surgeon," Evan replied, his tone sharp. "Everyone in there saw what happened. Maybe if you paid closer attention—" "That is enough," Maria stepped in, her voice cutting. "Evan, you are out of line." But Evan turned on his heel and walked away, leaving a storm of anger and disbelief in his wake. Alana's shoulders sagged as Maria placed a hand on her arm. "Do not let him get to you. Everyone knows you saved that man's life." But Alana knew the truth. In a place like Briarton Medical Center, accusations, no matter how baseless, could spread like wildfire. And for a black female surgeon like herself, it would not take long for doubt to settle into the minds of her colleagues. That evening, Alana sat alone in her apartment, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. The events of the day replayed in her mind, Evan's accusations, the beeping alarms, the weight of Henry Tate's life in her hands. She thought of the struggles that had led her here, the nights of studying until dawn, the quiet battles against bias, and the constant need to prove herself over and over again. Her eyes burned with frustration, but she refused to cry. She stared at the framed picture of her parents on the bookshelf, her mother's warm smile frozen in time. "I am not done," Alana whispered into the empty room. "They will not tear me down." She stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. The lights stretched into the distance, a mix of hope and chaos. Somewhere out there, Mr. Henry Tate was alive because of her. That was enough for now. But deep inside, Alana knew this was only the beginning. She would have to fight for the truth, for her reputation, and for herself. As she turned away from the window, her resolve hardened. No matter how hard the road ahead, she would face it head-on. Tomorrow, she would begin again. The next morning, Dr. Alana Reese arrived at Briarton Medical Center earlier than usual. The hospital hallways were still quiet, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead her only company. She had barely slept the night before. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the alarms from the heart-lung machine echoing in her mind. Evan Cross's accusation lingered in her head, his words replaying like a broken record. "You caused that malfunction, Reese." She gripped the strap of her bag tighter as she walked toward the surgical wing. "Morning, Dr. Reese," a nurse said as she passed. "Good morning," Alana replied automatically, forcing a polite smile. She kept walking, but she noticed a slight hesitation in the nurse's greeting. They have already started talking. Word spread fast in hospitals. Alana had learned that early in her career, a single mistake, even one outside of her control, could tarnish her reputation. It had taken years of relentless work to earn her place, to be seen not just as a capable surgeon, but as an exceptional one. Now it felt as though all of that could crumble overnight. In the staff lounge, Alana poured herself a cup of black coffee, hoping it would calm the storm building inside her. She took a slow sip, savoring the bitter warmth. "Long night?" She turned to see Dr. Michael Turner leaning against the counter. Michael was a senior surgeon, well-respected and steady, with graying hair and a face that seemed incapable of unkindness. Alana nodded. "Something like that." Michael tilted his head, studying her. "I heard about the heart-lung machine." Her jaw tightened. "Did you also hear that it was apparently my fault?" Michael frowned. "I would not put stock in what people say, Alana. It was a close call, but you saved Henry Tate's life. That is what matters." "Not to Evan," Alana muttered, her voice edged with frustration. "You know how this works. Perception is everything. If the board even considers the idea that I was negligent, my career—" She let the words trail off, unable to finish the thought. Michael placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice steady. "You are one of the best surgeons we have. Evan is ambitious, but accusations without evidence will not hold water. Just keep your head down, do your work, and the truth will come out." Alana nodded, though she remained unconvinced. Michael meant well, but it was easy for him to say. He had never had to fight twice as hard to earn half as much respect. "Thanks, Michael," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Anytime. You are not alone, Alana." The day dragged on, and the weight of the previous surgery refused to lift. In meetings, Alana felt eyes on her curious glances, whispers exchanged when they thought she wasn't looking. It was subtle, but it was there. By lunchtime, her appetite was gone. She sat alone at a small table in the cafeteria, poking at her salad. Around her, doctors and nurses bustled about, laughing, talking, normal. "Dr. Reese?" She looked up to see Nurse Maria Hall holding a tray and smiling gently. "Mind if I join you?" Alana shook her head. "Please." Maria sat across from her, setting down her tray. "Rough day?" Alana gave a weak smile. "You could say that." Maria leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I heard Evan has been stirring up trouble, saying things about yesterday." Alana's heart sank. "I knew it." "Do not let him get to you," Maria said firmly, her brown eyes blazing. "You did everything right, Alana, and you saved that man's life. That is what people should remember. Alana looked down at her salad, pushing the lettuce around with her fork. It does not feel like that, Maria. You know how this place works. People talk, and someone like me, I cannot afford this. Someone like you? Maria raised an eyebrow. You know what I mean, Alana said quietly. Black. A woman. It does not matter how good I am. If they see a crack, they will tear it wide open. Maria's face softened. She reached across the table, resting her hand on Alana's. Listen to me. You are stronger than this. Do not let them take what you have worked for. People like Evan Cross can talk all they want, but you show them. Alana's throat tightened. She nodded, grateful for Maria's presence. Thank you, she whispered. Maria smiled. Always. That afternoon, Alana sat in the conference room, presenting her surgical report to the review committee. A panel of senior doctors and administrators listened as she recounted the events of Mr. Tate's surgery. I acted immediately when the heart-lung machine malfunctioned, she said, keeping her voice calm. We manually bypassed, and I stabilized the patient. The surgery was completed successfully. Dr. Reese, one of the administrators, Dr. Lynn Garrett, said, her tone sharp. The equipment failure was concerning. Were there no signs of malfunction during your pre-op checks? No, ma'am, Alana replied. The machine passed all pre-op evaluations. It was fully functional when we started. Dr. Garrett frowned. Yet, it failed mid-surgery. Alana met her gaze. That is correct. I cannot explain why it happened, but I can assure you that it was not negligence on my part. Across the table, Evan Cross sat with his arms crossed, a smug look on his face. Alana's stomach churned at the sight. Thank you, Dr. Reese, Dr. Garrett said. We will continue the investigation. As the meeting adjourned, Alana gathered her notes quickly. Evan lingered by the door, waiting for her. Nice presentation, he said, his voice laced with sarcasm. Alana ignored him, pushing past. You know they are going to find something, right? Evan called after her. Machines do not just fail like that. She stopped and turned to him, her expression hard. What are you trying to say, Evan? He smirked. I am just saying you might want to prepare yourself. Alana's fists clenched at her sides, but she said nothing. She turned and walked away, her heart pounding. That night, Alana sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her. She had spent hours reviewing the hospital's equipment logs, searching for answers. According to the records, the machine had been inspected and cleared for use just days before the surgery. Something does not add up. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Maria. You okay? Alana typed back quickly, trying to figure this out. Thanks for checking in. She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. The weight of it all pressed down on her, the surgery, the accusations, the whispers. She thought of her parents, of the years they had worked to give her a chance at a life like this. Her mother always told her, when the world gets too loud, you get quieter, and you keep pushing. Alana let out a deep breath. She would not let Evan Cross win. Whatever had happened to that machine, she would find out. Tomorrow, she would start asking questions. The following morning, Dr. Alana Reese arrived at Briarton Medical Center with a purpose. She felt the pressure of the day weighing on her, but beneath the exhaustion, something harder had formed: determination. The events of the last 2 days were unacceptable. The heart-lung machine failure had been far too coincidental, and Evan Cross's accusations were louder now. Whispers followed her through the halls like shadows, growing darker with each passing hour. She stepped into the staff lounge to grab a quick cup of coffee. A few nurses were huddled by the table, whispering under their breath. They froze the moment they saw her. Good morning, Alana said evenly, her face composed. Morning, Dr. Reese, one of the nurses mumbled, before quickly looking away. Alana kept walking. She refused to let the sting of those moments show. It was a feeling she knew too well, the quiet exclusion, the doubt hanging in the air like a fog she could not clear. I have been here before, she thought. I survived it then. I will survive it now. At mid-morning, Dr. Lynn Garrett called Alana into her office. Garrett sat behind her large mahogany desk, her expression unreadable. The room was pristine, awards lined the walls. A framed photograph of Garrett shaking hands with a renowned medical board hung above her head. "Dr. Reese, please sit." Alana nodded and took a seat, crossing her legs to steady herself. "Thank you for coming in," Dr. Garrett began, her tone formal. "I want to update you on the investigation into the equipment failure during Mr. Tate's surgery." Alana swallowed, but maintained eye contact. "Of course." Garrett's lips pressed together, her hands folded tightly on the desk. "The hospital administration has been made aware of concerns surrounding your handling of the pre-surgery checks. Dr. Cross has provided statements suggesting that protocol may not have been followed." The words landed like a slap. "Protocol was followed," Alana said, her voice firm but calm. "The machine passed all pre-op checks. There was no indication of a malfunction." Garrett held up a hand. "Dr. Reese, I am not accusing you of anything, but we cannot ignore Dr. Cross's concerns." Alana's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, Dr. Garrett, I find it curious that Dr. Cross is so eager to assign blame when the machine failure itself remains unexplained." Garrett's gaze sharpened. "And what are you suggesting? That the investigation should focus on the equipment and its handling, not on placing blame before we have answers." Dr. Garrett's silence stretched for a beat too long. Finally, she nodded. "We will continue reviewing the facts. I suggest you stay focused on your cases and leave the investigation to us." Alana rose to her feet. "Understood." As she left the office, anger simmered beneath her calm exterior. Evan Cross had not just implied negligence, he had begun a campaign against her. And worse, others were starting to listen. In the operating wing later that afternoon, Alana prepared for a scheduled bypass surgery. Maria Hall stood beside her as she scrubbed in, offering quiet support. "Word is spreading, isn't it?" Alana said softly, keeping her eyes on the sink. Maria sighed. "Some people will believe what they want to believe, but not everyone, Alana. You have people on your side." Alana glanced at her. "It doesn't feel like that right now." Maria grabbed a clean towel and handed it to her. "Do not let them get in your head. You know the truth. You do your job, and you do it better than anyone else." Alana nodded, taking a deep breath. She needed to focus. "Thank you, Maria." The surgery went flawlessly. Alana moved with precision and purpose, shutting out the noise from the rest of the hospital. For the next 3 hours, nothing else mattered but the patient on the table. It was what she loved about surgery when she was in the OR. There was no room for doubt, no whispers, no accusations. Afterward, as Alana cleaned up, she caught sight of Evan Cross lingering in the hall outside the operating room. His arms were crossed, his smirk firmly in place. "Nice work in there," he said as she walked past. Alana stopped, her face calm but her voice icy. "What do you want, Evan?" "I just wanted to see how you were holding up," he replied, his tone faux sympathetic. "This investigation has got to be a lot for you." "I'm holding up just fine," she said evenly. Evan took a step closer, lowering his voice. "You know, Alana, this could have been avoided if you were paying closer attention. These machines are complex, and mistakes happen." Her fists clenched at her sides. "I did my job, Evan, and I will not let you smear my name to cover for something you know is not my fault." His smirk faltered, just slightly. "We will see what the investigation says." Alana didn't respond. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. That evening, as Alana sat in her quiet apartment, frustration boiled over. She stared at her laptop, reviewing the maintenance logs for the heart-lung machine again. There had to be something she missed, some clue that would explain what happened. She thought about Evan's words, the way he seemed so confident in his accusations. Why is he so certain? She wondered. Her phone buzzed beside her. It was a message from Kyle Simmons, one of the hospital's IT technicians. She had spoken to him briefly that morning, asking if there was any way to access the security cameras outside the OR. The message read, "I found something. You might want to see this." Alana's pulse quickened. She immediately typed back, "Can you meet me tomorrow?" Kyle's reply came quickly. "Yes, after my shift, in the parking lot." Alana leaned back in her chair, a small flicker of hope cutting through the doubt. If there was footage, it could change everything. Maybe this is the break I need. The next day at the hospital was more difficult than the last. Whispers followed Alana like shadows, and she could feel the unease among her colleagues. A group of nurses fell silent as she walked past, their eyes darting away. "Cowards," Maria muttered under her breath as she walked beside Alana. Alana tried to shrug it off, but the isolation stung. "I am used to this," she said softly. Maria stopped, grabbing her arm. "No, you are not. No one should be." Alana looked at her, surprised. Maria's face was set, her voice firm. "You are not alone, Alana. Do not let them make you think you are." For the first time in days, something warm stirred inside her. "Thank you, Maria," Alana said quietly. Maria nodded. "Go find the truth. I know you will." That evening, Alana met Kyle Simmons in the parking lot. He was a wiry young man with glasses and a nervous energy about him. He glanced around before handing her a flash drive. "I pulled the footage from the cameras outside or two," he said. "It's from the night before the surgery." "What's on it?" Alana asked, her heart pounding. Kyle hesitated. "I think you need to see it for yourself." Alana thanked him and quickly drove home. Once inside her apartment, she plugged the flash drive into her laptop and opened the video file. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. Alana watched as a figure in scrubs entered the OR late at night. The person moved deliberately, walking straight to the heart-lung machine. Her chest tightened as the figure turned slightly toward the camera, revealing his face. Evan Cross. Alana stared at the screen, disbelief washing over her. He had sabotaged the machine. The truth was finally in front of her, and it left her shaking. Relief, anger, and exhaustion swirled inside her all at once. "I knew it. But this was not over yet. Now she had proof. Tomorrow she would bring it to light." The weight of the revelation from the security footage sat heavy on Dr. Alana Reese's chest the next morning. She had barely slept after watching the video over and over again. There was no mistaking it. Evan Cross had tampered with the heart-lung machine. The evidence was clear, damning, and chilling. Sitting at her small kitchen table, Alana clutched a fresh cup of coffee, her hands trembling faintly. Outside the window, the world was waking up. Buses rolled past, pedestrians hurried to work, and the soft hum of life carried on as if nothing had changed. But for her, everything had. Why would he do it, she wondered. Jealousy? A desire to see her fail? Or something deeper? Something uglier? She took a slow sip, forcing herself to focus. The why didn't matter right now. The what did. She had the proof, and that changed everything. Her phone buzzed. It was Nurse Maria Hall. "Maria, you okay? Haven't seen you yet." Alana typed back quickly, "On my way. Long night. Thanks for checking in." With a deep breath, she grabbed the flash drive and tucked it into her bag. Today would not be easy, but the truth needed to come out. The hospital was alive with its usual hum of activity when Alana arrived. As she walked through the halls, she could feel the eyes on her again, furtive glances, quick whispers, people stepping out of her path. It was like she carried a scarlet letter, invisible but unmistakable. Soon, she thought, soon they will see the truth. In the staff lounge, Maria was waiting with a fresh cup of coffee. "You look awful," Maria said bluntly, though her voice was warm. "Thanks," Alana replied, managing a faint smile. She took the coffee gratefully and sat across from her friend. Maria's gaze narrowed as she studied Alana's face. "You found something, didn't you?" Alana hesitated, glancing around the empty lounge. She leaned in, her voice a low whisper. "I have proof, Maria. Security footage. It was Evan." Maria's eyes widened. "He what?" "I have him on camera tampering with the heart-lung machine the night before Henry Tate's surgery." Maria sat back in her chair, stunned. "That snake! I knew something wasn't right about this." "I am taking it to Dr. Garrett," Alana said firmly. "This ends today." Maria reached across the table, squeezing Alana's hand. "Be careful. Evan's got friends in high places, and people like him, when they feel cornered, they lash out." Alana nodded. "I know, but I cannot let him get away with this." Maria's voice softened. "You are not alone, Alana. Whatever happens, I am with you." Alana felt a lump rise in her throat. For days, she had felt isolated, battered by whispers and doubt. Maria's words were an anchor, grounding her when everything else felt unsteady. "Thank you," she said quietly. Maria nodded. "Go get him." Alana's heels clicked sharply against the floor as she walked toward Dr. Lynn Garrett's office. The flash drive felt heavy in her bag, like a secret waiting to explode. Her pulse quickened as she rehearsed what she would say in her head, determined to keep her voice steady. "Dr. Reese." She turned sharply to see Evan Cross approaching her down the hallway. His confident smirk was firmly in place, though there was a sharpness in his gaze like he knew something was coming. "Evan," Alana said coolly. She did not stop walking. "I heard you have been asking questions," he said, falling into step beside her. "You really should let this investigation play out on its own. Stirring the pot is not going to help your case." She stopped and turned to face him, her expression hard. "Is that what you think this is, Evan? Me stirring the pot?" "I think you are making a lot of noise for no reason," he replied, his voice low and dangerous. "Maybe you should be careful, Reese. People are watching." Alana's anger flared, but she refused to let it show. "So am I, Evan." She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving him standing in the hallway. Dr. Garrett's office was as pristine as always when Alana entered. The hospital director sat at her desk, glasses perched on the bridge of her nose, reviewing some paperwork. "Dr. Reese," Garrett said, looking up, "is there something you need?" "Yes, ma'am," Alana replied, her voice steady. "I have something you need to see." Garrett gestured for her to sit. Alana took the flash drive from her bag and placed it on the desk. "What is this?" Garrett asked. "Security footage from the night before Mr. Tate's surgery," Alana said. "It shows someone tampering with the heart-lung machine. I think it explains what happened." Garrett's brow furrowed. She took the flash drive and plugged it into her computer. Alana watched as Garrett's face shifted neutral at first, then taut with surprise and disbelief as the footage played. The grainy video clearly showed Evan Cross entering the operating room. His movements were deliberate as he knelt beside the machine, hands working quickly. Garrett paused the video, leaning back in her chair, her face pale. This cannot be real," Garrett said quietly. "It is real," Alana replied, her voice firm. "I do not know why he did it, but Evan sabotaged that machine, and then he blamed me." Garrett looked at her, her expression conflicted. "Dr. Reese, these are serious accusations." "I understand that," Alana said, holding her gaze. "But this is the proof. He endangered a patient's life to sabotage me, and he nearly succeeded." Garrett was silent for a long moment. Finally, she sighed, removing her glasses and pinching the bridge of her nose. "I will need to take this to the hospital board immediately." Alana nodded, her heart pounding. "Thank you." Garrett looked up at her. "In the meantime, Keep this to yourself. Do not confront Dr. Cross. Let us handle it. Alana stood. Understood. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Alana went through the motions of her rounds and appointments, but her mind was elsewhere. She could feel the tension in the air, thicker than before. By late afternoon, she received an unexpected page. Meeting in Conference Room B. Urgent. When Alana walked in, she found herself face to face with Dr. Garrett, the hospital board, and Evan Cross. He sat across the table, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "Dr. Reese," Garrett said, gesturing to a chair. "Please sit." Alana did as she was told, her spine straight, her chin lifted. "Dr. Cross," Garrett began, her voice clipped, "we have reviewed the security footage." Evan's face paled slightly, but he said nothing. Garrett continued. "The video clearly shows you tampering with the heart-lung machine prior to Mr. Tate's surgery. This is a serious breach of ethics, safety, and professional conduct." Silence fell over the room like a thunderclap. Evan shifted in his seat, his mask of confidence cracking. "It was not what it looked like," he said weakly. "There must be some misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding," Garrett said coldly. "Effective immediately, you are suspended pending further investigation." Alana's chest loosened for the first time in days. She looked at Evan, meeting his eyes. For once, he had nothing to say. Garrett turned to Alana. "Dr. Reese, we appreciate your professionalism in bringing this matter to our attention. The hospital owes you an apology for the doubts cast on your abilities." "Thank you," Alana said softly. As the meeting ended and the room emptied, Maria appeared in the hallway, her face lit with relief. "You did it," she said. Alana exhaled slowly, a small smile breaking through. "We did it." Maria squeezed her shoulder. "Let them talk now. The truth always comes out." For the first time in days, Alana felt the whispers quiet around her. The weight she had been carrying began to lift, but she knew this was only the beginning. The meeting was over, but its echoes followed Dr. Alana Reese through the hospital halls. The air felt lighter than it had in days, yet a strange quiet had settled around her. The truth had finally come to light. Evan Cross's suspension hung like a thundercloud in the distance, undeniable, looming. But Alana knew how hospitals worked. Briarton Medical Center was alive with unspoken rules and shifting allegiances. People didn't like confrontation. When a trusted colleague was exposed, it was as though a crack had appeared in the foundation of the hospital itself. And now, that crack was being felt everywhere through whispers, pointed stares, and the tense silence that followed her like a shadow. Alana walked into the staff lounge for a moment of quiet. The coffee machine hummed softly in the corner. She grabbed a cup and poured, her hands steady, her face a careful mask of composure. Two nurses, seated at a table across the room, abruptly stopped their conversation when they noticed her. Alana turned, cup in hand, meeting their eyes. One of them quickly busied herself with paperwork. The other gave her an awkward nod before looking away. "Morning," Alana said evenly. The nurses mumbled responses, but neither looked up again. Alana exhaled slowly, pushing down the sting. She had grown used to feeling like an outsider throughout her career, but this felt different. They know what happened, she thought, and still, they hesitate. "People are cowards," a voice broke through her thoughts. Alana turned to see Nurse Maria Hall leaning in the doorway, arms crossed. Maria's sharp gaze swept the room before she walked to Alana's side. "They should be thanking you, you know. Instead, they act like you started the fire." "It's easier for them to stay quiet," Alana replied, taking a sip of her coffee. "No one wants to rock the boat." "Well, you shook it all right," Maria said with a small smile. "Evan got what he deserved. And trust me, people will come around once they realize they can't ignore the truth forever." Alana gave a faint nod. "I hope so." Maria leaned closer. "How do you feel?" "Tired," Alana admitted, "but relieved." "Good." You did the right thing, Alana. Do not let anyone make you feel otherwise. Before Alana could respond, Dr. Michael Turner stepped into the lounge, his face drawn but kind. "Dr. Reese," he said, his voice even, "can I have a word?" "Of course," Alana replied, her heart tightening slightly as she followed him into the hall. Michael led her to a quiet corner outside the ORs. "The board met again this morning," he said softly. Alana nodded, bracing herself. "And?" "They're closing the investigation into the heart-lung machine," Michael replied. "Evan's suspension will hold while they conduct a formal review, but the immediate crisis has passed." Alana's shoulders relaxed a fraction. "Thank you." Michael hesitated, his brow furrowing slightly. "But Alana, I want you to prepare yourself. The fallout might not be over." "What do you mean?" Michael sighed, his voice low. "You did the right thing exposing Evan. But he has friends, powerful ones, and people here. People in this hospital do not like having their confidence shaken. There will be those who see what you did as disruptive." Alana met his gaze, the familiar burn of frustration rising in her chest. "So they blame me for uncovering the truth?" Michael held up his hands. "It isn't fair, I know. But you are a woman of color, in a field that still struggles to accept someone like you. I am telling you this because I respect you, and I want you to be prepared. The next few weeks may feel lonelier than before." Alana let out a breath, steadying herself. "I've been through worse." Michael smiled faintly, his eyes warm with understanding. "I know you have. And you'll get through this too. Just know that not everyone here doubts you. People like Maria, people like me. We see you. Alana, we see how good you are." For a moment, Alana felt a knot in her throat, her exhaustion threatening to overwhelm her. She nodded, her voice quiet. "Thank you, Michael. That means more than you know." "Keep your head up," he said gently. "Your work speaks for itself." That afternoon, Alana buried herself in her rounds. She moved from patient to patient, focusing entirely on their care. It was the one place where she still felt in control, where the noise of the outside world couldn't touch her. In the cardiology wing, she checked in on Henry Tate, the patient whose surgery had been nearly derailed by Evan's sabotage. Henry was sitting up in bed, his face pale but alert, a gentle smile forming when he saw her. "Dr. Reese," he said softly, his voice still weak, "it's good to see you." Alana smiled as she stepped closer. "Mr. Tate, you're looking much better today." "That's because of you," he said, his eyes earnest. "The nurses told me what happened, the machine, the surgery, all of it. I know it wasn't easy, but you saved my life. I'll never forget that." Alana felt a warmth spread through her chest, the kind that reminded her why she had chosen this path. "It's my job," she said gently. Henry shook his head. "No, it's more than that. A lot of people do their jobs, but you didn't give up on me. That means something." Alana swallowed hard, her throat tightening. "Thank you, Mr. Tate. That means more than you know." Henry smiled faintly, settling back against his pillows. "You keep fighting, Dr. Reese. You've got a gift, and the world needs more people like you." As Alana left his room, tears stung her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. Henry's words replayed in her mind. "You didn't give up on me." By the end of the day, Alana felt drained, the emotional toll catching up with her. As she grabbed her bag from the locker room, she found herself hesitating before leaving. For the first time in days, she didn't want to go back to her empty apartment. "Dr. Reese." Alana turned to see Maria standing in the doorway, her expression soft. "Come on, you're coming with me tonight." Alana frowned. "What?" "I'm not letting you sit alone in that apartment of yours, stewing over all this nonsense," Maria said. "You're coming to my house for dinner. My family is making lasagna, and we always have too much. You'll like my kids, they're loud but harmless." Alana opened her mouth to protest, but Maria held up a hand. "No arguments. You're coming." Alana smiled faintly. "Okay." Maria's home was a modest, cozy house tucked into a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town. The smell of garlic and tomato sauce greeted Alana the moment she stepped inside. The sound of laughter echoed from the kitchen, where Maria's two children were helping her husband David set the table. "Dr. Reese!" Maria's youngest, a bright-eyed boy named Eli, grinned up at her. "Mom said you're a doctor who fixes hearts. That's cool." Alana chuckled softly. "Thanks, Eli. That's what I try to do." Maria beamed at her from across the room. "See? I told you. You're already a hit." As they sat down to dinner, Alana felt something she hadn't felt in days, a sense of peace. The noise, the warmth, the effortless kindness, it reminded her of home. For the first time in weeks, she let herself relax. Later, as she stood to leave, Maria handed her a container of leftovers. "For tomorrow," she said, "in case you don't feel like cooking." Alana smiled, her voice soft. "Thank you, Maria, for everything." Maria gave her a knowing look. "You'd do the same for me." That night, back in her apartment, Alana sat on her couch with the lasagna beside her. For the first time in days, the silence didn't feel so heavy. She thought of Henry Tate, of Michael's quiet support, and of Maria's unwavering kindness. Maybe I'm not as alone as I thought. As she stared out the window at the city lights, a small smile curved her lips. She had faced worse before, and she had come through stronger. She would do it again. "They will not break me," she thought. "Not now. Not ever." The following morning, Dr. Alana Reese woke feeling lighter than she had in days. The quiet warmth of Maria's family dinner still lingered in her mind, like a soft cushion against the bruises of the past week. For once, the stillness of her apartment wasn't oppressive. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the sliver of sunlight that cut across her floor. Her phone buzzed another message from Maria. "Morning, superstar. Go show them who you are today. Coffee's on me if you need it." Alana smiled faintly, the kind of smile that softened the edges of exhaustion. Small acts of kindness, she thought. They could change everything, but her sense of relief was short-lived. Today, she would return to the hospital, to a place still echoing from the fallout of Evan Cross's suspension. The truth might have emerged, but the whispers hadn't disappeared overnight. If anything, they'd grown quieter but sharper, like knives being sharpened behind closed doors. She would need to stay steady, focused. When Alana stepped through the hospital's glass doors, the day's energy hit her immediately. Machines humming, conversations buzzing, nurses darting between rooms. Briarton Medical Center was alive, and she reminded herself that this was why she was here. For the patients, for the lives she could save. "Morning, Dr. Reese," Maria said, handing her a steaming coffee as promised. Alana accepted it with a grateful nod. "You're a saint," Maria grinned. "I know. Now, what's on your plate today?" "A triple bypass at noon and post-ops this morning," Alana replied. She hesitated, then added softly, "I need to stop by administration first. I want to follow up on Evan." Maria raised an eyebrow. "Careful, Alana. You poked the hornet's nest hard enough already." "I know," Alana said, "but there's something that doesn't sit right with me. Why did Evan sabotage the machine in the first place? What was he hoping to accomplish?" Maria sighed. "Some people don't need a good reason to try to tear someone else down." "I still need answers," Alana replied firmly. Alana stopped by the administrative office mid-morning. She didn't expect to learn anything new. Formal reviews moved like molasses in bureaucratic systems, but she wanted to stay informed. The hospital director, Dr. Lynn Garrett, was away in meetings, leaving Claire Morton, Garrett's assistant, at the desk. Claire was a young, reserved woman with round glasses and an air of constant nervousness. She looked up quickly when Alana entered. "Dr. Reese," she said, fumbling with a stack of papers, Can I help you with something? I just wanted to check on the status of the formal review of Dr. Cross, Alana said, her voice even. Has there been any progress? Claire hesitated. I am not sure I can say, Dr. Reese. Dr. Garrett is handling the matter directly. Alana tilted her head slightly. I understand that, but I need to know how far this is going. Is there any indication of when a decision might come through? Claire bit her lip, clearly uneasy. I don't think I'm supposed to say this, but there have been rumors that someone from the board of directors is asking for leniency. Alana stiffened. Leniency? After what he did? Claire glanced nervously over her shoulder, then lowered her voice. Some people think suspending Dr. Cross was too extreme. He has friends on the board, Dr. Reese, people who think, well, that it reflects poorly on the hospital to make a scandal public. Alana's pulse quickened, a familiar frustration curling in her chest. He endangered a patient's life. If anyone should be worried about how this reflects on the hospital, it's him, not me. Claire flinched at the sharpness in Alana's voice, and Alana immediately softened her tone. Sorry, this has just been a lot. Claire offered a small, nervous smile. I understand. I really do. But you should be careful, Dr. Reese. There are people who think you're stirring trouble. Stirring trouble. The phrase made Alana's stomach turn. She'd heard it before, usually whispered in the same breath as knows her place or too ambitious. Thank you, Claire, Alana said quietly. I appreciate the warning. As she left the office, her mind raced. Someone on the board was protecting Evan, or, at the very least, trying to smooth things over. This was no longer just about a failed machine or an attempted sabotage. There was something bigger at play, and Alana was determined to find it. Alana spent the next few hours focused on her rounds, trying to push the conversation with Claire to the back of her mind. She checked on her patients one by one, including Henry Tate, who was improving steadily. Seeing him awake and talking brought her a small sense of peace, even amid the chaos. Dr. Reese, Henry said as she checked his chart, how are you holding up? Alana glanced up, surprised. I'm fine, Mr. Tate. Better than you, I'd say. Henry chuckled softly, though his voice was still weak. Don't lie to me, Doc. I know a fighter when I see one, and you've been fighting for something. Am I right? Alana paused, his words striking deeper than she expected. She sighed, setting down the chart. I suppose I have been. Henry nodded knowingly. Keep fighting. The good ones always have to. His words stayed with her as she made her way to the staff lounge. At lunchtime, Alana found herself back in the lounge, seated across from Maria. The hum of the hospital was a distant murmur behind the closed door. Claire told me something this morning, Alana began quietly. Maria looked up from her sandwich, brows furrowed. What? Someone on the board is trying to protect Evan, or at least soften the fallout. Maria's face darkened. Of course they are. People like Evan always have a safety net. I'm starting to think this goes deeper, Alana continued. It's not just about him sabotaging me. There's something more going on here, Maria. Something I can't see yet. Maria leaned back, her eyes narrowing. And you're not going to let it go, are you? Alana shook her head. I can't. This is about more than me now. He endangered a patient, Maria. And if people at the top are protecting him, who's to say it won't happen again? Maria sighed, shaking her head. You've got a fire in you, Alana. Just promise me you'll be careful. I will, Alana replied, but I'm not letting this go. That evening, Alana stayed late at the hospital. She sat in a corner of the records room, combing through maintenance logs, security reports, and patient files. If Evan had tampered with equipment before, there had to be signs, discrepancies, unexplained malfunctions, anything that could suggest a pattern. The fluorescent light above her buzzed faintly as she flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning line after line of text. After nearly 2 hours, she found it a small note buried in a previous maintenance report. Machine calibration requested by Dr. E. Cross 3 days prior to failure. Alana froze, her breath catching. Evan had requested a calibration, and now the machine had failed? She quickly scanned the rest of the report, noting inconsistencies in the technician's comments. The numbers didn't quite add up. He's done this before, she thought, her pulse quickening. She copied the report, tucked it into her bag, and stood. Her heart pounded as she stepped into the quiet hallway, the weight of her discovery sinking in. Evan's actions were no mistake. He hadn't just sabotaged the machine, he had likely been tampering with other equipment all along. The question was, why? As she walked toward the exit, Alana's phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "Late night again? Be safe, Alana." Alana smiled faintly, the knot in her chest loosening just a little. "Always. Thanks, Maria." The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, Alana felt like she was getting closer to the truth. The next morning, Dr. Alana Reese sat alone in her car in the Briarton Medical Center parking lot. The small note she had found in the maintenance log the night before was clenched in her hand, the paper slightly crumpled from her grip. Evan Cross's name was printed clearly in black ink, tying him to a calibration request 3 days before the machine failure during Henry Tate's surgery. She exhaled sharply, staring out at the hospital's glass facade that reflected the pale, early morning sky. The discovery had confirmed her growing suspicion. This wasn't the first time Evan had tampered with hospital equipment. But why? The question nagged at her. Sabotaging her career was one thing. Endangering patients repeatedly, that was something darker. You can't stop now, she thought, straightening in her seat. Gathering her bag, she stepped out of the car. Her heels clicked softly against the pavement, but her steps were purposeful. Today, she would bring the evidence forward, and no matter how much resistance she faced, she would not stop until the truth was exposed. Inside, the hospital hummed with its usual rhythms. Alana walked through the hallways with her head high, though she could still feel the weight of whispers brushing against her like a cold breeze. She caught glimpses of staff members watching her, some with uncertainty, others with subtle respect. The events of the last few days had drawn a sharp line in the sand, dividing the hospital into those who supported her and those who remained silent. But Alana didn't have time to worry about the opinions of others. Not now. As she approached the nurses' station, Maria Hall looked up from a patient file and raised an eyebrow. "You've got that look again." "What look?" Alana asked, trying to keep her tone light. "The I'm about to start another war look," Maria said. She lowered her voice, stepping closer. "What did you find?" Alana glanced around, ensuring no one was within earshot. "I found something in the logs. Evan requested calibration on the heart-lung machine just days before the failure. It's in black and white." Maria's eyes widened. "What? That's it then?" "That's your proof." "It's part of it," Alana said cautiously, "but I need to dig deeper. If this is a pattern, there might be other machines, other reports. This could be bigger than just one incident." Maria frowned, her concern evident. "Alana, this is dangerous. If Evan or whoever's backing him finds out what you're up to, they won't go down without a fight." "I know," Alana replied, her voice calm but firm. "But this isn't just about me anymore. If Evan is willing to endanger patients to further his agenda, someone has to stop him." Maria nodded slowly, her eyes filled with admiration and worry. "Then I'm with you. Just tell me what you need." Alana felt a flicker of warmth at Maria's unwavering support. "I'll let you know," she said softly. By mid-morning, Alana sat in the hospital archives, surrounded by stacks of maintenance logs, equipment reports, and technician notes. The small room was tucked away in the basement, its dim fluorescent lights flickering faintly. She combed through page after page, searching for patterns. The reports were dense, filled with numbers and jargon that blurred together, but Alana's sharp eye caught details others might miss. After nearly an hour, she found it another anomaly. The ventilator machine in OR4 had undergone a similar calibration adjustment weeks earlier, just before it experienced a minor malfunction during a routine surgery. No harm had come to the patient, but the incident had been quietly written off as a technical glitch. Evan's name was tied to the request. Alana's heart quickened. She scanned further and found another discrepancy, this time involving an IV infusion pump. Again, Evan's name appeared in the report. "This can't be a coincidence," she muttered under her breath. She grabbed a notebook and began documenting everything: dates, machines, Evan's involvement. The pattern was clear now. Deliberate tampering disguised as maintenance, followed by subtle equipment failures. It was calculated, insidious, but the question remained, why? As she stepped out of the archives, Alana's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a text from Kyle Simmons, the IT technician who had given her the security footage. "Need to talk. Urgent. Meet me in the back stairwell after lunch." Alana's pulse quickened. Kyle had already put himself at risk by pulling the footage for her. If he was reaching out again, something must have happened. She replied quickly, "I'll be there." After a rushed lunch with Maria, where Alana shared only fragments of what she had discovered, she slipped away toward the back stairwell. It was a quiet, seldom used part of the hospital, its walls dimly lit and stained from years of wear. Kyle was already there, leaning against the rail. He looked up sharply when Alana approached, his face pale and tense. "What's going on?" Alana asked, her voice low. Kyle glanced around nervously before speaking. "Someone knows I helped you with the footage." Alana froze. "What do you mean?" "Yesterday I got a call from someone on the board. They didn't say much, just that I should stay out of things that don't concern me. It was a warning, Alana." Her stomach dropped. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Kyle said quickly. "But you need to be careful. If they're watching me, they're definitely watching you." Alana's mind raced. "Kyle, listen to me. This goes deeper than I thought. I found evidence that Evan's been tampering with other machines, 2 ventilators, IV pumps, everything." Kyle's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Yes, and if the board is protecting him, it means someone else is involved, someone with power." Kyle ran a hand through his hair, his anxiety clear. "This is big, Alana. Too big. What are you going to do?" "Finish what I started," she replied firmly. "I'm taking this evidence to Dr. Garrett. She needs to see how far this goes." Kyle hesitated, then nodded. "Just be careful. If they're willing to protect Evan, they'll try to shut you down any way they can." "I know," Alana said, her voice steady, "but I can't let this continue." By late afternoon, Alana had compiled all her findings into a clear, organized report. She made copies, one for herself, one for Dr. Garrett, and one to keep as a backup. The tension in her chest was tight, but controlled. As she prepared to head to Garrett's office, Maria appeared by her side, as if she'd sensed the moment. "Where are you off to now?" Maria asked, her tone light but her eyes sharp. "To see Dr. Garrett," Alana said. "I've got enough to expose everything." Maria studied her for a moment, then smiled faintly. "You've got guts, Alana Reese. Don't let them take that from you." Alana's throat tightened, but she nodded. "I won't." When Alana entered Dr. Lynn Garrett's office, the director looked up from a pile of paperwork, her expression wary. "Dr. Reese," Garrett said, gesturing for her to sit. "What brings you here today?" Alana placed the report on Garrett's desk, her hands steady. "This." Garrett frowned, reaching for the folder. "What is this?" "Proof that Evan Cross has been tampering with equipment throughout the hospital," Alana said, her voice calm but firm. "Not just the heart-lung machine ventilators, IV pumps, other critical devices. I've documented everything. Garrett's face paled as she flipped through the pages, her expression hardening. How did you find this? I looked, Alana replied simply, and I kept looking until I saw the pattern. Garrett sat back in her chair, exhaling slowly. Dr. Reese, you realize how serious these allegations are? I do, Alana said. But this isn't just about Evan anymore. If someone on the board is protecting him, then they're complicit. Patients' lives are at risk. Garrett met Alana's gaze, her eyes searching. I will take this to the board immediately. Alana nodded. Thank you. As she left the office, her heart pounded in her chest. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but the fight was far from over. They may try to stop me, she thought. But I'm not backing down. The truth was out there now, and she would see it through, no matter the cost. Dr. Alana Reese left Dr. Lynn Garrett's office feeling both relief and apprehension. She had done what needed to be done, placed the evidence of Evan Cross's actions directly in the hands of the hospital director. Yet a gnawing unease followed her down the hall. The hospital felt different today. The quiet tension that had been building since Evan's suspension was now palpable. Colleagues avoided her gaze, and conversations hushed when she entered a room. Briarton Medical Center, once a place where Alana felt purpose and pride, now felt like hostile ground. Her footsteps echoed softly as she walked toward the cardiology wing. Maria Hall spotted her from the nurse's station and fell into step beside her. You did it, didn't you? Maria asked, her voice a careful whisper. Alana nodded, glancing around to make sure no one overheard. I gave everything to Garrett. The report. The patterns I found, she has it all now. Maria blew out a low breath. Good. About time someone exposed him. So, what's the next move? That's up to Garrett and the board, Alana replied. But it won't stop here. This is bigger than Evan. Someone's been helping him, covering for him. There's too much at stake for it to be just one person. Maria frowned. You don't think they'll sweep it under the rug, do you? Alana tightened her grip on her clipboard. If they try, I'll make sure they don't succeed. I didn't come this far to let the truth die quietly. Maria's expression softened. You're a fighter, Alana. But just remember, you don't have to fight this alone. For a moment, Alana allowed herself to breathe. Maria's unwavering support had been a lifeline during the last chaotic weeks, reminding her she wasn't entirely isolated. Thanks, Maria, she said quietly. Maria gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. I've got your back, always. The day moved forward, though the tension in the air refused to dissipate. By the afternoon, Alana's unease turned to outright suspicion. Something felt off. It wasn't just the avoidance from her colleagues, it was the silence, the looks, the feeling that something was brewing just out of sight. Her fears were confirmed when she was paged unexpectedly. Dr. Reese, report to conference room C immediately. Alana's stomach dropped. What now? She stopped briefly at the nurse's station where Maria stood reviewing files. I've been called to conference room C, Alana said, keeping her voice even. Maria looked up sharply. The boardroom? What for? I don't know, Alana replied, but I'm going to find out. Maria's expression darkened. Be careful, Alana. I will. When Alana stepped into conference room C, her chest tightened. The room was filled with a handful of hospital administrators, including Dr. Lynn Garrett at the head of the table. But what struck her most was the presence of Dr. Evan Cross. He sat at the far end of the table, looking calm and collected, as though nothing had happened. What is he doing here? Dr. Reese, please sit, Dr. Garrett said, her tone clipped and professional. Alana hesitated but took the empty chair near the door. She glanced at Garrett, searching for clues in her expression, but the director's face was unreadable. Garrett cleared her throat. We've reviewed your report, Dr. Reese. And? Alana asked cautiously. Garrett's gaze flicked toward Evan Cross for the briefest moment before she continued. While the evidence you've presented raises concerns, we have determined that it is inconclusive. Alana's heart stopped. Inconclusive? Without direct proof of malicious intent, we cannot take further action against Dr. Cross, Garrett said, her voice steady but cold. Alana felt the blood rush to her ears. You have the footage, the maintenance logs, the pattern. What more do you need? Evans spoke then, his voice smooth, rehearsed. Dr. Reese, I understand this has been a stressful time for you, but to accuse me of sabotage without definitive proof, well, that's dangerous, isn't it? Alana's hands curled into fists under the table. Dangerous? What's dangerous is allowing someone to endanger patients and walk away without consequence. Garrett raised a hand, her voice sharp. Dr. Reese, that's enough. No, it's not enough, Alana shot back, unable to keep the anger from her voice. You're protecting him. You know what he's done, and instead of holding him accountable, you're sweeping this under the rug. Dr. Reese, Garrett said, her tone hardening, I strongly suggest you calm yourself. Evan's smirk widened, just enough to make Alana's blood boil. I'm not the problem here, Alana said, her voice quieter, but no less intense. And deep down, you all know it. Silence filled the room. Garrett met Alana's gaze for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. Then she sighed. This meeting is over. Evan stood, adjusting his watch as if he had all the time in the world. Good day, Dr. Reese. As Alana watched him leave the room, a mix of rage and disbelief threatened to overwhelm her. They're letting him get away with it, she thought. They're really going to let this happen. The rest of the day was a blur. Alana went through the motions of her rounds, but her mind was elsewhere back in that conference room, replaying every word, every smug look Evan had thrown her way. She had handed them the truth, and still, they turned their backs. By the time her shift ended, Alana was exhausted emotionally and physically drained. As she packed her bag in the locker room, Maria appeared, her expression etched with concern. What happened? Maria asked softly. They're letting him off, Alana replied bitterly. The board said my evidence was inconclusive. Evan gets to walk away, and I look like the problem. Maria's face darkened with anger. That's ridiculous. They know you're right, Alana. They're just too scared to admit it. Alana sat heavily on the bench, her shoulders slumping. I don't know what to do, Maria. I've pushed so hard and now I'm starting to wonder if it even matters. Maria knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. It matters. Even if it feels like no one is listening, it matters. You don't quit, Alana. That's not who you are. I'm tired, Alana admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Maria squeezed her shoulder. I know, but you're stronger than this. And there are people who believe in you, even if you can't see it right now. Alana looked at her friend, the quiet determination in Maria's eyes, steadying her just enough to keep going. That night, as Alana sat in her apartment, her mind still spinning, a knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Kyle Simmons, the IT technician, standing on the threshold. Kyle? Alana said, surprised. What are you doing here? Kyle looked nervous, his eyes darting behind him before meeting hers. I've been digging. I think I found something else. Something big. Alana's heart skipped a beat. What did you find? Kyle pulled out a thumb drive and held it up. It's from the hospital's server logs. There are communications between Evan and someone high up, someone on the board. Alana's eyes widened. Are you serious? Kyle nodded. I couldn't let this go. I knew there was more to it. Alana stepped aside, letting him in. As Kyle set up her laptop and plugged in the drive, Alana felt a spark of hope ignite inside her. Maybe the fight wasn't over yet. The faint hum of Alana's laptop filled her small living room as she sat beside Kyle Simmons, staring at the files now open on her screen. Her hands gripped the edge of the coffee table, her mind racing as she read the words in front of her. The emails were damning. Lines of text exchanged between Evan Cross and Howard McClellan one of the hospital's board members, painted a clear picture of manipulation and deceit. Ensure the adjustment causes no lasting harm. Reese will crack under pressure. Once this plays out, the replacement will follow. Alana swallowed hard, the pieces falling into place with horrifying clarity. Howard McClellan, a name she'd seen countless times in hospital newsletters and board reports, a man who had spent years protecting his own interests. He was powerful, untouchable by most, and it was clear he had been helping Evan Cross from the beginning. Kyle's voice broke through her thoughts. This isn't just sabotage. They're trying to force you out. Alana nodded slowly, her voice tight. It's not about the machines. This was planned. Why you, though? Kyle asked, shaking his head. You're one of the best surgeons in this place. Alana exhaled, feeling the bitterness rise in her chest. Because someone like me, someone who doesn't fit the image they want, will always have to fight harder to prove they belong. Kyle glanced at her, guilt flickering in his eyes. I'm sorry, Dr. Reese. I didn't realize it was like this. It's not your fault, Alana said softly, her gaze still fixed on the screen. But now we have the proof. They won't be able to ignore this. Kyle hesitated. You're going to show this to Dr. Garrett? Alana nodded. First thing tomorrow. She needs to see this. Kyle looked uneasy, his fingers tapping against his knee. Be careful, okay? People like McClellan don't play fair. If he finds out you have this… Alana met his gaze, her voice steady. I know the risks, but I'm not backing down. The next morning, Alana walked into Briarton Medical Center with the thumb drive tucked securely in her bag. The halls buzzed with the usual rhythm of hospital life, patients being wheeled to procedures, nurses hurrying from room to room, but beneath the surface, Alana felt the tension. It was subtle, like the weight of a storm gathering on the horizon. Eyes darted toward her, conversation slowed as she passed, and a knot tightened in her stomach. They know something's coming. She made her way toward Dr. Lynn Garrett's office, her steps purposeful. But as she neared the administrative wing, she spotted Garrett leaving her office, deep in conversation with none other than Howard McClellan. Alana froze, her heart hammering. McClellan was a tall man with graying hair and a polished demeanor. He spoke with authority, his voice calm and low, but Alana could see the way Garrett's face was drawn with tension. They're talking about me. She ducked into a side corridor, pressing herself against the wall as they walked past. McClellan's words drifted toward her. This needs to be handled quietly, he was saying. We can't afford any more disruption. I understand, Garrett replied. Her voice clipped. But Dr. Reese is a problem, McClellan interrupted, his tone hard. It's time to move forward. Alana clenched her fists, a cold fury rising in her chest. She had known McClellan was powerful, but hearing it confirmed, hearing her name dismissed so casually, made her blood boil. Once they disappeared around the corner, she stepped out of the shadows and continued toward Garrett's office. Her hands were shaking as she knocked on the door. Come in, came Garrett's voice. Inside, Garrett looked up from her desk, her brow furrowing when she saw Alana. Dr. Reese, I wasn't expecting you. Alana closed the door behind her and pulled the thumb drive from her bag. We need to talk. Garrett raised an eyebrow. About? This. Alana walked forward, placing the thumb drive on the desk. It's proof that Evan Cross and Howard McClellan have been working together, sabotaging equipment, endangering patients, trying to ruin my career. Garrett's face went pale, though she tried to hide it. Dr. Reese, those are serious accusations. They're not accusations, Alana said, her voice steady. It's all in those emails. Read them for yourself. Garrett hesitated, glancing at the small drive as though it might burn her fingers. Where did you get this? It doesn't matter, Alana replied firmly. What matters is that you act on it. I trusted you, Dr. Garrett. You told me you would handle this fairly, But I heard you talking to McClellan just now. He's trying to sweep this under the rug, and you're letting him." Garrett's expression hardened. "Be careful, Dr. Reese. You're treading dangerous ground." "No," Alana said, leaning forward. "They're the ones treading dangerous ground. They've jeopardized patient safety. If you ignore this, you're complicit." Garrett stared at her for a long moment, and Alana could see the conflict in her eyes, the push and pull of fear and duty. Finally, Garrett sighed, rubbing her temples. "Leave the drive with me," she said quietly. "I'll review the evidence." "And what happens then?" Alana demanded. Garrett looked up, her gaze tired. "I don't know yet, but I'll handle it." "You'd better," Alana said, her voice firm. "Because if you don't, I'll take this to the press, the medical board, whoever will listen." Garrett blinked, clearly taken aback. "You wouldn't." "Try me," Alana replied. The hours after that conversation passed in a haze. Alana buried herself in her work, trying to push aside the anxiety clawing at her chest. She had thrown down the gauntlet, and now all she could do was wait. By mid-afternoon, Maria found her outside a patient's room, reviewing a chart. "You look like you're about to explode," Maria said softly. Alana sighed, rubbing the back of her neck. "I gave Garrett the proof. All of it." Maria's eyebrows shot up. "And?" "She said she'd review it, but I don't trust her," Alana admitted. "She's scared of McClellan. I think they all are." Maria's face tightened with anger. "So what now?" "Now we wait," Alana said quietly. That evening, as Alana packed up her things to leave, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number. "Watch your back. Some people don't know when to quit." Her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she just stared at the screen, her fingers cold around the phone. Then, another message came through from Maria this time. "Dinner at my place again. David made chili." Alana's eyes stung, the tension in her chest loosening just enough for her to exhale. "On my way," she typed back. She slid the phone into her bag and left the hospital, the unknown message still lingering in her mind. But as she drove toward Maria's warm, welcoming home, one thought stayed with her. They can't scare me into silence. Not now. Not ever. The next morning, Dr. Alana Reese sat quietly at her kitchen table, staring at the faint glow of dawn breaking through the window. Her phone sat beside her, screen dark, as if daring her to look for messages that might confirm her fears. The anonymous text from the night before still echoed in her mind. "Watch your back. Some people don't know when to quit." It was a warning, veiled but sharp. She had felt the ground shifting under her feet for days now, the pressure of the truth pressing up against the weight of power. But Alana had come too far to retreat. She had no appetite for breakfast, but she sipped her coffee slowly, letting the warmth steady her. As the light filled the small apartment, casting long shadows over her modest furniture and pictures of her family, Alana made a quiet vow to herself. "No one will silence me, no one." With that resolve, she grabbed her bag and keys, squared her shoulders, and stepped out the door. At Briarton Medical Center, the tension had reached a fever pitch. The air felt heavier than usual, as though everyone knew that something was about to break. Alana noticed it the moment she walked in, nurses whispering more urgently, colleagues stealing sidelong glances at her as she passed. She approached the nurses' station where Maria Hall was finishing a report. "You look like you're walking into battle," Maria said softly, though her sharp eyes shone with pride. "Maybe I am," Alana replied, her lips lifting into the smallest smile. "Where's Dr. Garrett?" Maria's expression grew more serious. "She's been locked in meetings all morning. The board's here. I heard McClellan came in early, too." Alana's stomach twisted at the mention of Howard McClellan, the board member who had been working with Evan Cross to orchestrate her downfall. The thought of him, smug and untouchable, made her hands tighten around the strap of her bag. "I need to know what's happening," Alana said quietly. Maria gave her a firm nod. Then go find out. I'll cover for you if anyone asks. Alana made her way to the administrative wing, her shoes clicking steadily against the polished floors. She had no invitation to the board meeting, but at this point, formalities were the least of her concerns. When she reached the large conference room doors, she paused, her hand hovering near the handle. Through the frosted glass, she could see faint silhouettes of people seated around the table. She closed her eyes briefly, drawing a deep breath, before pushing the door open. The room fell silent. All heads turned toward her hospital board members, department heads, and at the head of the table, Dr. Lynn Garrett. On one side of the room sat Howard McClellan, his face impassive, his sharp gaze cutting into her like a blade. Across from him, Evan Cross sat straight-backed, looking far too composed for someone who had nearly destroyed her career. "Dr. Reese," Garrett said, her voice tight with surprise. "This is a private meeting." "I understand," Alana replied, her voice calm but resolute. She stood tall, her chin lifted as she scanned the room. "But I believe I have a right to be here." McClellan leaned back in his chair, folding his hands across his chest. "What exactly do you hope to accomplish by barging in, Dr. Reese?" Alana turned to him, meeting his gaze without flinching. "The truth. That's all I've ever wanted." The room fell silent again, tension crackling like static in the air. Dr. Garrett cleared her throat. "Dr. Reese, we are in the process of reviewing the evidence you provided. You must understand that these matters take time." "There's no time," Alana interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "What more do you need? I've given you the emails, the maintenance logs, the security footage. How much longer will you let this go on while lives are at stake?" Evan shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but McClellan spoke before he could. "Dr. Reese, you're making a scene. This hospital cannot afford unnecessary disruptions." "Unnecessary?" Alana snapped, turning toward him. "What's unnecessary is a board member protecting someone who sabotaged medical equipment and endangered patients. What's unnecessary is sweeping corruption under the rug while you point fingers at the people who refuse to stay silent." Garrett's face paled, but she said nothing. McClellan's jaw tightened, though his voice remained calm, almost condescending. "Careful, Dr. Reese. You're walking a very thin line." "No," Alana said firmly, her voice ringing through the room. "I'm walking the only line that matters, the one where patient safety comes first. This hospital deserves better. The people who trust us with their lives deserve better, and I won't stop until they get it." The room was silent, save for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Garrett looked visibly torn, her eyes flickering between Alana and McClellan, who now looked far less composed than before. Finally, Garrett spoke, her voice soft but steady. "Howard, leave the room." McClellan's head snapped toward her. "What?" "You heard me," Garrett said, her tone hardening. "This meeting concerns Dr. Reese's accusations against Dr. Cross, and now, apparently, I can't allow this conversation to proceed with you here." McClellan's face darkened, but he rose slowly, straightening his suit jacket. "You'll regret this, Lynn." Garrett's gaze remained firm. "That's my burden to bear. Now leave." With one final glare toward Alana, McClellan stormed out of the room, the door closing sharply behind him. Dr. Garrett turned to the other board members, her voice steady. "We will reconvene this meeting under closed review. Dr. Reese, please stay." For the next 2 hours, Alana sat in that room, answering every question, presenting every piece of evidence again calmly, clearly, methodically. Evan Cross sat silently as the walls closed in on him, his earlier confidence dissolving as Garrett and the board pieced together the timeline of his sabotage and McClellan's involvement. By the time the meeting ended, Garrett stood, her voice grave. "The actions of Dr. Cross are not only unethical, but dangerous," she said, her eyes hard as she looked at him. "Effective immediately, your employment at Briarton Medical Center is terminated. Further, This board will conduct a formal inquiry into board member Howard McClellan's involvement. Evan's face was ashen. He tried to speak, but Garrett cut him off. "Leave this room, Dr. Cross." Evan stood slowly, his footsteps heavy, as he walked toward the door. Before leaving, he glanced back at Alana, his eyes a mixture of anger and defeat. But Alana didn't look away. That evening, as Alana left the hospital, the air felt different, lighter, freer. The truth had finally won, though the cost had been high. The board had promised a public statement exonerating her, and word was already spreading through the hospital. As she walked toward the parking lot, Maria appeared at her side, grinning ear to ear. "You did it, Alana." Alana exhaled slowly, a small, genuine smile breaking through. "We did it!" Maria threw an arm around her shoulder. "Now let's get out of here. David made pie." Alana laughed softly, the sound breaking free like sunlight after a storm. For the first time in weeks, she felt a weight lift from her chest. The fight had been long and lonely, but it had been worth it. As she looked back at the hospital, its windows glowing faintly against the evening sky, Alana felt a sense of peace. She knew there would be other battles, other storms waiting for her, but she also knew she wasn't alone. And no matter what came next, she would face it, one step at a time. The weeks that followed brought a quiet transformation to Briarton Medical Center. Dr. Evan Cross was gone, his actions condemned publicly by the hospital board. Howard McClellan resigned soon after, though the official statement cited personal reasons. Whispers around the hospital shifted, no longer sharp-edged rumors about Alana Reese, but murmurs of admiration for the surgeon who had risked everything to expose the truth. Dr. Alana Reese walked through the halls with her head held high, her confidence no longer overshadowed by doubt. She had earned every ounce of respect, now filling the air around her. Nurses smiled when they saw her, and colleagues spoke her name with newfound reverence. On a crisp Friday morning, as she prepared for a complex heart surgery, Maria Hall stepped into the OR, holding out a fresh pair of gloves. "Big case today?" Maria asked with a wink. Alana smiled, calm and steady. "Just another heart to fix." Maria tilted her head, grinning. "You know, you're kind of famous around here now. Everyone's calling you the doctor who wouldn't quit." Alana chuckled softly, shaking her head. "I'm just someone who did what had to be done." "Maybe so," Maria replied warmly, "but you did it when no one else had the courage. Don't forget that." As Alana looked at her team preparing the operating room, steady hands, hopeful faces, and trust in their eyes, she realized just how far she had come. The fight to clear her name and protect her patients had been grueling, but it had made her stronger, sharper, and more determined than ever. The heart monitor beeped softly as Alana stepped up to the operating table. "All right, everyone," she said with quiet authority. "Let's get to work." The team nodded, and the room settled into focused silence. Here, in the OR, where lives hung in the balance and skill mattered more than status, Alana was exactly where she was meant to be. If you enjoyed this story of resilience, truth, and perseverance, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful and inspiring stories. Your support helps us create narratives that celebrate courage and determination, reminding us all of the strength we carry even when the odds are against us. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next story. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon.